Hello, friends, and welcome to the Pregnancy Loss Podcast. I'm Valen. I will be your host every Tuesday. I am a postpartum and bereavement doula, mom of four, lost mom, lover of Pilates, watermelon, crystal healing, and most of all, matte pink lipstick. I literally can't get enough. This podcast is to create awareness of all the realities that come during and after pregnancy loss. Not only will we talk about the pregnancy loss part, but also life and motherhood after. This is something that I see rarely discussed. My hope is that you leave this podcast feeling just a bit lighter, but also educated, supported, and really seen. This podcast is not only for parents of loss, but also the grandparents, the aunts and uncles, the family, the friends that it has affected. If you have a topic you'd love to see discussed, leave me a comment on the episode you're listening to, and I'll respond personally. Let's jump in. Hey mamas, we have a super special episode today, and I'm so happy you're here to share it with us. I'm interviewing Katie Joy Duke. She is an author, a mindset coach for women, transformational speaker, and mom of two daughters, one living and one in spirit. She practiced social justice law for 9 years before her firstborn daughter, Poppy, was stillborn at full term. Motivated to heal from her devastating loss, she left her legal career in 2016 and spent 6 years writing her best-selling memoir, Still Breathing My Journey with Love, Loss, and Reinvention, which she published May of 2022. And on a side note, I bought it and I read it before I had this conversation, and it's a very healing, loving, just wonderful book if you're looking for something to read. Only days after submitting her final manuscript to her copy editor, Katie got her first ever mammogram. That scan led to many others, and at the tender age of 41, Katie was diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic breast cancer, which was just last year. She completed 5 months of chemotherapy in August, had a mastectomy and lymph node surgery in October, and then 6 weeks of radiation this January and February. Authenticity is her number one value, and she looks forward to writing another memoir about her healing journey with cancer. From the moment we started talking, I fell in love with this woman. I'm so excited for you guys to learn and hear from her. She just got done with her chemo session. I think she said a week before we had our conversation. So she is just a badass, and she's just still healing and still sharing her story and still trying to help other women who have suffered through loss like we have. So enjoy this conversation. I am so excited to introduce you to Katie Joy Duke. I've never edited one podcast. I just post them because I'm like, if I don't, I'll never do it. Okay, well, I'm so happy you're here. Guys, thank you for being here. We have Katie Joy Duke. Do you go by Duke's, like your last name?
Yeah, that's my last name. I never changed it because I was practicing law when Eli and I got married, and I just wanted to keep that, like I just had that identity as a lawyer and wanted to keep it. And then as I developed, subsequently my sort of my writing and my author, and I'm just like, I love it. Plus, in some ways, it's also an homage to my father because, and you've read my book, but Jim Duke, I'm Jim Duke's daughter, and I will always be Jim Duke's daughter. So.
That's so beautiful. I love that so much. But yeah, so we're here today to talk about your story, your stillbirth story, and your daughter Poppy. So, I mean, we can start with just you telling us your story. Like,
Sure.
Share.
Sure. Great. Yeah. So thanks so much for having me, Valen. And yeah, my name is Katie Joy Duke. I'm an author and a coach. And I used to practice law, and now I have a beautiful rainbow baby who is 5.5, not really a baby anymore. But yeah, so Valen and I connected around our story of stillbirth and loss. My husband and I were actually, this is a very special day. So we're recording on February 15th. I know that things don't air the day they record, but today is actually our engage-iversary. So we were engaged on this day in 2015. I know, isn't that sweet? And as the story goes, which is not a spoiler, if for anyone who chooses to read my memoir, which I hope all you do, is we found out the very next day that we were pregnant with our daughter. So tomorrow, February 16th, is the day that we found out we were pregnant with Poppy. So I went from being Eli's girlfriend to Eli's fiance to the future mother of Eli's children, all in the span of 48 hours, 72
Yeah,
hours,
purpose
whatever.
and vision.
It was a big trip. We were on vacation in Hawaii and it was really wonderful. And it was all very romantic and beautiful. And so the story for us goes that we ended up having a very beautiful pregnancy, and we ended up getting married on April 25th. So shortly after we returned home from our trip, we decided to have a wedding and put everything together, and kept Poppy a surprise from our parents and from 90+% of our community. We wanted the wedding to be about us. We wanted it to be about our union and our love, and then of course have this beautiful surprise that we were also going to be parents. And we were I don't want to say we were ready. We were ready-ish, right? Like we were both in our mid 30s, and it was a good time to have children, but we hadn't like planned it out. Let's just say that. Um, Anyway, so I had a really beautiful pregnancy. I loved being pregnant. I was one of those women that glowed. I was just like, I never had morning sickness. I just had like, it was like I felt like I was like, oh, I just felt like one of these earth goddesses. Like it was just like, oh, this is what the body is meant to do. And meanwhile, I was also a lawyer, so I was working and practicing law and arguing cases in court. So I'm like putting all my cute maternity suits on and everything that was fun. I was like got to go shopping for fancy maternity clothes. Anyway, so I was really into it, and everything progressed really really well. Until the very end, and at which point so I was due on October 25th, so that was my due date, 2015, a little over 7 years ago now. And um, in the same way, Valen, because I've listened to your birth story on your podcast, Poppy Poppy's movements definitely slowed down. And I have to say, I've never heard anyone describe it the way that you did, which actually in some way I'm glad that I'm saying this, but I feel like a little part of me healed when I listened to you describe your experience of Evelyn, right? Evelyn?
Yeah. Yeah.
Her movements slowing. So like, you could tell that she had slowed down, but you were still moving, and so she was still moving. And so there was this desire, this longing like inside of you that's like you're like, "Oh, well, that's okay. It's okay, right? Like I'm ready, she's slowed down because there's not much room," and like all these things that we're told.
Yeah.
And everything that you Google about, baby's movement slowing down and all the things, and because you can't conceptualize, I think at that point, unless for instance, I'm sure there are some women who maybe like are very anxious and like just like, I'm going to go to the emergency room, right? In my case, that never crossed my mind. It
Same.
never, or I didn't allow it to, right? Like maybe our deepest seated fears, we just don't ever let them surface in that environment. So anyways, Poppy slowed down. I went into labor, which I also have to say, uh, in as I relate to you as a mother who's gone through this type of loss, is the only thing that I got on my birth plan that I wrote down, that I wanted was was to go into labor naturally.
Yeah.
In hindsight, as I'm a writer, and so I'm like looking through all my notes and journals and finding birth plans, and I'm just like, there were these very rage filled, angry moments where I was like, nobody asks you if you want a live or dead baby. You know what I mean? Like I just was like, "Rah!" Like I just like really like, oof, because there, it's just like, oh, would you like an epidural or do you want a natural, or like, oh, do you want this or that, or like, oh, do you want to give a bath or do you want to wait? And you're like, no one asked me if I wanted to, no one asked me if I wanted a live baby. Of course I want a live baby.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm being kind of silly, but
No,
um, it's true, right? Like we go through these things. So anyway, I went into labor naturally. It was kind of everything that I would have imagined going into labor would be. It was pretty simple at the beginning, and then it got hard. And then we got the green light to go into the hospital, at which point, um, within a half hour of being there, they were going to monitor Poppy's heartbeat. And as you so aptly described, the process of the one nurse not being able to find,
Similar.
so similar, right? One thing that our distinction was very different, that you had described, was how like no one was willing to say it. Like you felt like
Yeah,
you had to be like, she's dead, which I also said those words, but thankfully, I'm just going to say thankfully, the staff that was taking care of me was more straightforward, right? Like,
good.
why would you keep someone why would you keep someone hanging in those moments?
Yeah,
So, and all of this is really beautifully captured in the memoir that I wrote, but they couldn't find Poppy's heartbeat. And so, it was just the thing from like the nurse leaving the room to go get the midwife coming in, confirming, I'm so sorry, Katie, we can't find a heartbeat. The shock of just like, I don't, what do you, that doesn't, what do you mean? I mean, it was just like, bleh, you get it. Like that just utter shock of, and horror of like, she's dead. Like, what do you, like, how can, I can't even conceptualize of that at this point.
yeah.
Like the car seat is in the car. Like we went to the car seat lady and made sure that like we did, like there's like a quarter test where like you make sure that like the car seat doesn't move with the quarter, and like we did all the things, you know what I mean? We
He's
like
alive yesterday.
yeah, exactly, like the nursery, like it's done, like what do you mean, like I've got maternity, like I mean all of it, like my breast milk, right? And like it's all
Question.
like it just floods in. And so we in terms of, I could go on, right? But like, and for your listeners, everyone's experience is a little bit different. But I did end up giving birth vaginally, which I remember you asking for a C-section, right? And one of the things that had come into my mind was, do you cut her out of me? Like it was just like all these questions of just like, well, what do I do now? And in my case, Poppy was my first, and one of the nurses very kindly explained, or I think it was the midwife, but had kindly explained that a C-section would only be warranted in the case of emergency to the baby or the mother, and in this case, there was no emergency. And medical emergency, right? Like there might have been an emergency in my brain, but then that giving birth vaginally would be better for my future, right? Because I would be able to then give birth vaginally in the future, right? So I wouldn't have that complication. And so, all of these things are just like flooding in, um and it just kind of having to process. So I did end up giving birth later. That's that day that we had arrived. And I just want to say, so Poppy was born at 3:39 p.m. on October 26, 2015. And lately I've been seeing 3:39 on the clock, like a lot, like PM in the afternoon. I'm and it all for a while it made me bawl, and I would see the number and I would just like fall apart. And lately she's been revealing herself to me again in that way, and just like I've seen the time and I just get the biggest smile on my face. I really do. I just, I'm like, oh, hi darling, like hello, thank you for being here, thank you for watching over me, thank you for being a part of my life, thank you for being, like I also recently read a book called The Light Between Us, but the author's name is um oh goodness, Jackson, I think is her last name. Anyway, she's a psychic medium and she talks a lot about signs, and it's Laura Lynn Jackson. And I would recommend it to your audience. I think it's a nice way to really imagine and believe in the possibility that our babies their spirits are still very much a part of our life, and they can be if we pay attention, right? We the livings have to pay attention. We have to be willing to receive those signs. Anyway, so Poppy was born that afternoon, and we ended up spending the night, and I decided that I wanted to donate my breast milk, which was a really big healing piece for me. Um, I, I mean, obviously, for people that are listening to us, like on the subject of, side note, on the subject of like what to do when you have a stillborn baby, like that. You're like, okay, I didn't like read that book before going to the hospital. You know what I mean? Like you don't you read all the like happiest baby on the block, and you read like how to breastfeed and how to swaddle and how to you don't prepare for stillbirth. So I think what one thing I mentioned in my memoir is this one book that it's I mean it's a beautiful book. What can I say? I mean it's doing the best it can, but it's like 100 things for grieving parents to do after having a stillborn child. It's one of those books.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like I'm like post mortem, right? I'm like in the empty nursery reading this book on things that you should do when your baby dies. And I hated this book because I hated that I was reading this book. You know, I hated that I needed this book and I resented this book. And, you know, there were things like, you know, give your baby a name and give your baby a bath and all this sort of stuff. And, you know, I'm like cross-eyed going like, who doesn't give their baby a name? You know, I mean, but again, like that book was very relevant and important for helping shift, I think, helping shift things for parents who have stillborn babies, because we we do need to give our babies our names. And as you and I were talking about before we started recording, a lot of women, you know, even just as soon as 30, 40, 50 years ago, their babies were taken away from them when they were stillborn, and they never got to hold them, and they never the option of giving a bath or giving a name or swaddling or taking pictures didn't even exist.
Yeah.
So thankfully that has changed. Anyway, I could go on forever and answer all sorts of questions that aren't even being asked, but but
Of course.
um yeah, we ended up leaving the next day, and as any, I'm sure all mothers and of course fathers, but I want to say this too, like the it took me years. I'm 7 years. Poppy died 7 years ago. For anybody listening that's, you know, 1 weekend, 2 months, a year, 2 years. I mean, it takes this takes a lot of time, and you want to punch the wall because you don't want it to take time because it hurts so bad. But I will say what I wanted to say is specifically that it took me years, probably 3 or 4, even 5 years, to truly accept that my experience as the mother was extremely different than my husband's experience.
Yeah.
And that I'm not dissing on him when I don't include him, when I don't say we, when I don't whatever, like, because for a long I'm always like, oh, and Eli was hurting too, but you know, but because he was, but also like we carried our babies, we created them, you know, they grew inside of us, we nurtured them every single second, nanosecond of the time, that from the moment they were conceived, it was us. You
Yeah.
know, we brought them into the world and then we gave birth to them. And so I really just I take I have now stepped in. It's almost like accepting the responsibility and the power of saying I am the mother, and so my experience is different. So I
Yeah.
that's just a side note. So for all you moms out there, if you're feeling any sort of like guilt or whatever about how your experience is different than the man's, it just is. It's
Yeah.
going to be different. It's going to be different.
And a lot of the times too, I think they don't they don't have an outlet to talk. So we don't truly know how they're feeling. And to tell other people how they're feeling, I think is just not fair to them
It's
because they're not
true.
able to accurately tell people how they're feeling.
It's
They're
so
not
true.
It's not safe for them.
And even on a similar note, something that Eli, my husband, dealt with a lot, was people not even asking him how he was doing. People would see him and say, "How's Katie doing?
Yeah.
How's Katie doing?" So then Eli's put in the responsibility of like, uh, she's struggling, you know. But meanwhile, no one's like, "How are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, how is this for you?" And in my case, and I'm not sure if yours was different because I know your husband is military, and so he was gone some of the time. Eli and I were like glue, you know, we were stuck together. Um it just doesn't give Eli the chance to articulate what he's going through, because no, and then that's where men start to then bury their feelings, because it's like, well, mine don't matter, no one cares, no one's even asking me how I'm doing. I am responsible for taking care of Katie, my wife. That is my job. So I'm just going to turn into a rock, solidify, not process my feelings, and then drive forward and take care of my wife. Meanwhile, we're struggling as women and also desperate to know if our husbands are hurting.
I know.
Desperate. Like, is this hurting you as much as it's hurting me? Because it doesn't seem like it is. And like that makes me angry because, like, it's so complicated.
Causes
This is so
a lot of pain.
so hard for marriages. This is so hard for marriages.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would say on the top 10 things not to say to a grieving parent is, I hear a lot of people end up getting divorces over this kind of loss. And you're like,
thanks.
thanks for people actually said that to us, like 1-2 months into our loss. We're literally newlyweds, we're madly in love with one another, we get pregnant, we have this baby, she dies. 1 or 2 months into our loss, people are like, yeah, it's amazing, you guys are really like, it's amazing to see how much you two love each other, and, da, da, da. And we're like, yeah, like, was I supposed to go to the courthouse and file for divorce? Like, what are you talking about? Like, of course, like, no.
Yeah, people are so uncomfortable with
They are.
mortality, and they just know what they hear or see on social media or in movies, and it's
I
it's
know.
completely different when in real life you lose a baby. And yeah, I know me and John, he it was different for us because he wasn't there the first 5 days. So he didn't get to hold her. He didn't get to see her. He, and and me and my grief and my trying to process and take care of my kids and um, make all these decisions. I, didn't even think to ask the funeral home, like, can we wait? Can we do this? Nobody told me it was a choice. Like nobody,
Yeah.
it's like, but anyways, like his experience, he was so upset and mad. But I mean, like Eli, he was the protector, the husband, like he needed to be stoic and protect us, and he didn't matter. And not that we felt that way.
Of course.
We were mad and resentful because they just looked fine. Like they just,
Yeah.
but so we ended up going to therapy for a year
Yeah, we were in
after
therapy
this.
too.
And
Yeah.
if we didn't, we probably would not be together.
Agreed. I
It's,
yes, we had 6 months of weekly therapy that helped drain our savings account and was totally worth it. You know
yeah.
what I mean? Like, it was vital to understand how we were processing things differently. Specifically in my case, right? Like, because not everyone is this way. In many ways, Eli and I were still getting to know one another. We met in 2013. We fell in love. We dated for a year. He asked me to marry him. I said yes. We immediately got married because we were pregnant, and then our baby died. So like, we'd only known each other for, actually, so I've never thought about this, but we had known each other for just under 2 years, and our when our baby died, like, known each other.
Yeah.
And so, like, I had never seen him grieve. We hadn't needed to
You haven't
grieve. We
gotten
had
there yet.
no, good God. Like, we were still, I mean, like, we barely even argued, like, because we were still in this beautiful, and that, and it was bliss. Like, I mean, we were really happy. Like, we were really into each other. I had dated a lot. I had had lots of 3-month relationships, and like, this
Yeah.
guy was it. And so, gosh, yeah, we've, um, and I will say in regards to therapy, which is I think super important both for couples,
Yeah.
when you're ready, right? When you're ready, as an individual, as an individual, I tried getting. I had never. I'm sure I could have used some therapy, but I had never been in therapy before Poppy died. It had never really. been one of those situations where it's like, oh, I need a therapist. Um, but I tried a therapist that I did not vibe with. You read about that in the memoir, and I was really I felt like that was really an important piece of my journey to share, so that other people could go, oh, okay, interesting. Like, I don't actually like my therapist either. Like, I am gonna dump this person because you can, right? Like,
Exactly.
we are hiring the person to help us. If the person is not helping us, or if it doesn't vibe, like, it's your prerogative to say, you know what, I got to go find somebody else that I feel like I can vibe with. And to know that there are so many different modalities out there, and different and personalities, that you're going to be able to really grow with a therapist. But when the time is right, like, therapy is really helpful to just have someone, of course, objective, right? Because ideally you're going to have a therapist that doesn't say the dumb stuff that your best friend or your sister or your mom or your neighbor or all these very well-intentioned, loving, kind people who say things that they don't mean are painful, or that we as the griever have to just kind of smile and say, thank you. Thank you for that piece of advice. That is, now I'm going to have to go home and cry for half an hour, and then take a 3-hour nap, and hopefully wake up and not ruminate about for the next 6 days
Yeah.
that you just said that to me. But okay, thanks. Like,
I know. We don't even have the fight in us
yeah. Well, exactly.
to deal with these things that are said.
No,
Luckily,
that's why we write books and start podcasts.
I know. That's how we get to do it. I know. I was when I was reading your book, and it's like I don't think I encountered anybody that said things to me like that. Just like that off-putting, ridiculous comments, about you can have another one, she wasn't meant to be, or whatever they want to say.
Yeah, yeah. Or
But
now she has angel wings. Now you have an angel.
that's nice. I wanted my baby. That's
Thanks. Yeah, you're like, I was interested in a living child that I could take to the playground.
yeah. But um, I think language is another thing that is so crucial in supporting people who have lost babies. I don't know about you, but like when after she died, like a few days later, my best friend flew in to take care of me and the kids, and she came with me to the records office, and I had him print out every single piece of paper that, and it was like a stack this big for just the one day. Um, so I could go through it. But the term fetal demise, like,
Mm.
I don't know if that bothered you at all, but
Hmm.
for me, it was like, what does that mean? Fetal demise. Like, it's just the negative terms that are used in regards to stillbirth and miscarriage and everything else. Like, I feel puts more shame in us.
Mm. Yeah.
um,
I definitely had an experience similar to yours when I read Poppy's autopsy report for the first time, which, like, I was a disability lawyer at the time that Poppy died. So I was practicing Social Security disability law, and reading medical records was part of my
like,
job. I read them all the time. Obviously, I had never had cause to read an autopsy report, and certainly not an autopsy report for a baby. But reading those findings, yeah, first of all, like, I mean, and it's all medical, right? Like, it
yeah,
has to be, right? It's certainly not like common, vernacular for like conversational. But I do agree. I remember in particular, like, I think it was intrauterine fetal demise, right?
yeah,
So, like, stuff like that, like, it's painful, right? And reading about what was it, intrauterine growth restriction, right? The IUGR, um which I had never heard of, and people mentioned in my first time I ever heard that acronym was in my support group, which would be another thing that if you have if for anyone listening, if you have access to a support group, like through a children's hospital, if you're in a big metropolitan area or somewhere that has a children's hospital, I highly, highly recommend the support group. Being around, I mean, as you and I are just like jibber jabbering and we can relate. We can just relate. like you to be able to relate to other parents who have been through this. There's just nothing to me, there's nothing more valuable because we just get it. I mean, and we're laughing. I mean, we're like we could cry, we could laugh, we can all the things is because our family and friends are well meaning, but they don't get it. And I'm glad they don't get it. I don't want
Right?
everybody
We
to
don't want
get it.
anybody to.
I don't need anybody to get this. I mean, I don't want anyone to, like, God, when I hear about other people having had loss, I'm just like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, it's gonna suck,
Yeah.
like there's just no way
You
around
think about the
this.
long road that they have ahead of them,
It's a very long
all the
road.
steps, all the
Well, and I that actually reminds me, in the context of support groups, it reminds me of the very first one that we went to was November of 2015, and at that meeting there was a young mother who her son was born in November, was stillborn in November 5 years previously. So he was born in 2010, and she was there at the support group talking about how every November she had she took a week off, like from work around the time that he died, and how she fell apart and how it was still hard. And I was 11 days after it was 11 days after Poppy had died, and I'm sitting there going, oh my God, no, no, it's still going to be hard in 5 years. 5 years? Are you kidding me? I couldn't fathom that this was like our new normal or whatever it is that you like. I'm still going to be sad in 5 years. And you're like, yeah, I mean, I, every October for me is a challenge. But now it's crazy for, in my case, our daughter Moxie was also born in October. So there's like the joy of October
yeah.
and the sadness of October. Um, your listeners would have no reason to know this, but this last year I battled, and I am going to use the word battle, even though I don't really like
Yeah.
the war analogy, stage 4 breast cancer diagnosis, 5 months of chemotherapy. I had a mastectomy in October. So now it's like, okay, so October is now like I got my boob cut off, I lost a baby, like all. I'm just like, October, you can just take a dump. Like, I'm done with you. I'm just
Seriously.
like, I'm like, October, you suck. October, my dad's birthday is in October, and he had all, he's also passed away of cancer. So like, and life is so hard and beautiful and mysterious. And I think, on the subject of anniversaries, even though we aren't necessarily talking about those, like, I think that, like, and today actually being an engage anniversary, for a long time, I mean, I counted Mondays. Poppy was born on a Monday. So like every Monday, it's another Monday. It's like, oh, Monday, like Mondays were destroyed, right?
You
And
gotta
then it
find
was like,
patterns.
yeah, and then it was like okay, then you're just counting, and then of course, like the anniversary, and then the day that we found out we were pregnant. Oh, and then that's such a horrible day, and then like all these days, right? And as time has gone on, we do have choice, right? Like, we can, how we choose to memorialize, how we choose to celebrate, and also to honor, to forgive ourselves, like, to let it be one more letting go, or, you know, that would be, that was one of the big themes of my memoir, was choice, and empowering our, and giving our, like, realizing as the mother that we don't have to be defined by our losses, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't want for, I definitely felt like, as the person, I definitely walked through the world for a while and felt like I wish I could just wear a t-shirt that said, my baby died so many months ago, right? Like, flip the chart, like, my baby died 5 months ago, that's why I am this way, whatever, whether it was like I look this way or act this way, or why I'm bawling in the cereal aisle because I, or the grocery store, or whether or not, like, I felt like I wanted to wear a sign that said like here's why I'm such a wreck. And then as time goes on, right, you can kind of like, you realize I don't have to be defined by this experience, but I can choose to learn and take I what I want from this and carry my daughter's legacy forward, right? Like live for her, talk about her in a way that like, to say, look, there's no way that we can prevent every single stillbirth. And unfortunately, other parents are going to go through this. So I'm going to share my story. Valen, you're sharing your story, right? Like we're going to talk about it so that for the next person that goes through it, they know, oh, okay, I'm not alone. I'm absolutely 100% not alone. And all these feelings are normal. They suck. They're painful. It's like grueling. And I needed help. Oh my gosh, I needed so much help.
Yeah.
I learned how to ask for help so that in this, like, Poppy taught me how to ask for help. So when I was diagnosed with cancer, I immediately started asking for help. No hesitation, right? Like I was like, you can make me food, you can bring me things, you can take care of my daughter, you can like I was like, I can't do this without my community. And I did learn that. Poppy helped, teach me that.
That's a big lesson I think that a lot of us learn through this.
Yeah,
Um, I think a lot of moms and women in general have trouble always asking for help for anything. In your book
completely.
too, you said it's so funny because I always refer to Evelyn as my catalyst for
Mm,
everything that I'm doing. And you use the same phrase
yes.
in your book about it just being that thing. Like for me, it was realizing that life is really short and that's so freaking cliche, but
And true.
and true. And for me, I'm like, I had a really, I don't want to say traumatic, but I had a terrible childhood, uh,
Mm.
a really
I remember you mentioning your
difficult
mom.
mom. And
Yeah.
so I just, I was always kind of just disassociated, living,
Mm.
just getting by, not, like, not in the
In your
moment,
body.
in my
Yeah.
body. I was always in
Yeah.
my,
Mm.
and I'm like, I have these two beautiful little girls that are right here with me. And I have been just clueless. I'm just, and I'm like, I can't be like this anymore. I don't want to be like this anymore. Like I want them to love life because I always thought I loved life. Like I love being alive. I love experiencing everything we experience, but she made me realize that I was not doing a very good job. I
Oh,
needed to change.
wow. So
Um,
that was her message.
so I feel like that was her message for me. And I had always, you know, I guess been the victim. Like I was a victim to my suffering. It was
Yes.
from my trauma in my childhood years. And it's still like July will be 4 years for me from Evelyn's death. And I had realized lately that I am not doing a very good job again. I have let my healing go. I have
Mm.
not been, since we moved here from the Seattle area like June 2021. So like 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago. And I haven't found another therapist yet. And I haven't like gotten help. I haven't even like gone to the dentist. I haven't been taking
Mm.
care of myself again.
Self-care. Yeah.
And that's spilling over into my parenting again.
Hmm.
And it's just, she reminds me that my chaos is self inflicted.
Oh, Valen, I just have to acknowledge you for being so vulnerable and willing to share all of that. I mean, that is special. And people reflect that to me too, because that is, I say vulnerability is, well, authenticity is my number one value and vulnerability is my superpower.
Yeah.
It is a gift to be able to be vulnerable, to talk about the fact that you haven't gotten your teeth cleaned, because that's disgusting. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. That was a joke. But
Hacking.
Well, because the self-care piece is so I really do think and this is and you had children, right? You had two children and then you went through a loss and now you have your son. And I didn't have any children and then I went through my loss and now I have my daughter. And when people have said a lot of podcasts that I've been on, podcasters want to know what was your inspiration for writing the book? Why did you write the book? Right. And I said, well, the first and foremost, the number one inspiration that for me was to heal. I wrote the book to save my own soul. It was the way writing for me was the way that I could process without judgment, with
Yeah.
no fear. I mean, when I ended up getting my developmental editor to help me really finish the arc of the story, I came to her with 125,000 words. That's that would have been
Ridiculous.
like a 500-page book if I had just
That's a lot.
dumped all of that into, right. The book itself from cover to cover is I think 214 pages. I got it under 50,000 words. So all of my point is to say the book itself is a beautifully edited, gorgeous narrative, right? That takes you on a journey, right? It is not a dump of everything that I ever cried into my laptop but that's how I processed, right? So it started as a way for me to heal my soul. And then it became something much bigger. And that was like the gift to every other parent who've ever been through stillbirth, like the gift to all the rainbow babies who were in their 40s and 50s, who had a mother, to your point, that never took care of herself, that never figured out how to get out of the darkness of loss. And so they lived their whole life going like, I just lived in the shadow of something and I didn't even know what it was until I found out that my mother had a stillborn child when I was like, I've heard these stories from people where they're like, casually at a potluck where they're like, "Hey, Katie, I just want to let you know, like, you sharing your story on Facebook is so amazing because I didn't know until I was 50 that I had a big brother who died because my mom never talked about it. And I always wondered why my mom was so sad. I never understood, and come to find out, like, I get it now. Like, and what you're doing, and this is, they're saying this to me, like the fact that you're working so hard on your healing is not only a gift to yourself, but to your future children.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, we heal for ourselves and then we heal for our children. We heal because we are mothers and because we want to be the best mother that we can be, and we want to show our children that existed before the loss and our children that exist after that we can get through these things,
Yeah.
that life is going to be hard. Oh, good Lord, life is hard,
I
right?
know.
But it's so worth it. The alternative, I mean, and I've talked about, I mean, the alternative, which is death, which I believe, or non-existence, right? Like I believe, I personally, especially now having gone through cancer treatment and having to face my own mortality and the fear in that way of leaving everything behind way before I really wanted to. And thankfully, the treatment has really worked very well, but I still have to live with all that. Is that, wait, what was my point? I'm losing my train of thought. Uh, I
With
guess ultimately,
mortality, we're like, keep going.
yeah.
You're good.
Well, yeah. What was I saying? Just like that we oh, the alternative, right? The alternative being dead, the
Alternative.
alternative, right? So essentially what I was thinking, so the alternative, and I so I was had this fascinating conversation with this amazing woman who's a Reiki master and sort of like a little bit of a medium-ish, like she's got all sorts of cool, beautiful juju powers.
Yeah.
And we were talking about not being afraid of dying, right? So going through my cancer treatment, something that I had to face was my fear of death. And man, I faced it head on. And I'm not afraid anymore. I really am. I had to go into that because, like, it's one thing to have your baby die, and then and because that sucks. And then it's a whole nother thing for someone to be like, ah, you have stage 4 cancer. You're 41 years old. This could kill you, right? You're like, so then you bravely just like barrel into that journey and go, okay, I'm terrified. I'm going to face my fears. And so what my friend and I were talking about is I'm not afraid of death. But you know what's so amazing about being alive is that, like, we get to drink a nice warm cup of coffee. We get to eat chocolate covered strawberries. We get to touch our children's hair. We get to feel the warmth of the sun on our skin. We get to lay down on nice clean sheets and cuddle with our lovers, and like we get to smell the roses when they're blooming in the spring. Like, the we get to actually tangibly experience all of this. And so I think whatever is beyond is probably pretty awesome and painless, and there's no anxiety and all that sort of good stuff. But as hard as life is, man, it's great. It's special. We get to watch sunsets. We get to jump into the ocean. We get to all the things that we get to feel. And it's remembering that. And so I think even when you're in the depths of your sadness and your grief and your pain, grief is love, right? So when we can remember that I can feel this, and that and to offer yourself self-compassion, to put your hands over your heart, to say, this is a moment of suffering. This is, oh, okay, I'm suffering. I feel this. I feel this in my bones. I feel it in my shoulders. I feel it in the tears that are streaming down my face. I feel it because I love the child that I lost, and I love myself. And so I choose to love myself and keep going, right? And know that time doesn't necessarily heal, but one action, the next action, right? The next
Very
healthy, right
true.
action, the taking care of yourself, the drinking the water, the getting your teeth cleaned, the showing your children that, like, hey, look at me. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to do the things. We're going to cook a healthy meal. We're going to spend time together. Just one action over and over and over. And then eventually, you're like, hey, look at me. I'm getting better.
Yeah.
I'm getting better day by day.
That was a big part for me, is the intentionality of making the choices every day to live. Just
Yes.
getting out of bed. Like, I had to have the conversations in my head, like, you have to get up. You're going to let your 3 and 5-year-old like run around, not eat, like, and that's another thing too. I can imagine losing a baby, my first baby, because for me, I had my two other ones that were like I had to live for.
You had to.
And so I always get so sad for moms, especially with the first baby, like, because I know you had your work and you had your husband, but it's like children are different when it comes to being a reason to live,
Yeah.
like, which now, obviously. And
Oh, yes.
um, but yeah, being intentional, that's like my word of the year this year because I'm like,
Oh, good.
I have to do this. Like, I have to get some trauma therapy. Like, I never got
Yes.
specialized therapy. I just got a general therapist because that's all that was available at the time. Because it was right before COVID.
Yep.
But, um, yeah, I need like somatic healing, and I need,
Yes. Yes.
you know, Reiki, and I need all
Yes.
these things. So that's what I'm doing this year, because
Good.
I just realized I'm slipping back into my pain, and
Hmm.
then everything else falls. Everything falls.
Yeah.
So, yeah, oh my God. I just love how vulnerable you are. You really are. And like, that's something that's always been hard for me. Like, I'm not a very vulnerable person. Like, I think I'm getting there. I think I'm
Yeah.
working on it because I'm a natural avoider. That's what my therapist always told me. I avoid everything. Um,
Well, and that's part of the disassociation. I mean, if you spent your entire childhood disassociated, like, that was a coping mechanism. It was a survival mechanism for
exactly.
you in order to make it through. And thank goodness that our brains are wired to protect ourselves. Like that's how our brains are wired, right? So you made it through a traumatic childhood with a mother that didn't take care of you the way that you deserved to be taken care of,
Yeah.
right? Because and she wasn't taking care of herself, or whatever
Yeah.
trauma,
Sure.
cyclical, historical, generational, lineage, all the stuff,
Yeah.
right? Like I mean, my mother and I are have a, be, a beautiful relationship, but I have also realized over time that I cannot do the work for her.
Yeah.
We can only do the work for ourselves. Healing is an inside job. It takes a heck of
Yes.
a lot of courage. It takes so much courage to go deep and to peel back the layers, and also just to really it's a lesson in self-acceptance, because I mean we we're meant to be taken care of and nurtured when we're children, and then whatever circumstances are piled upon us, like without our choosing necessarily, and then we become adults and all of a sudden we're supposed to be responsible. You used the word victim earlier, right? So like shifting from a victim mindset that is sort of all that's been modeled to you.
Yeah.
If victimhood has been modeled to you your entire life, shifting into a responsibility mindset is a huge deal, right? And like that's how we heal the world. That's, I mean, really truly, like I think that that's something also too that's so vitally important for those of us who are going through this, is that like we are not just healing ourselves when we do this hard work, like we are helping heal the world, because we are modeling what is possible
Yeah.
to our children, to our partners, to our communities, and then in our case, right, because of technology and writing, everything that we can share like to others, that like this is possible, and it is not easy, but it is so worth it.
I
It's
know.
so worth it.
There's a lot of I've what did I saw something or I read something yesterday, but it was probably because all the research I'm doing
Yeah.
for the membership. But the I always hope that these podcast episodes that we do and the writings and they reach the moms who are unable to fight.
Yeah.
Like there are so like that's something you really don't see or hear talked about, is that the moms who, I don't even know what the term would be, but they are just, they cannot let go.
Hmm.
They're in their pain. They're always there. They are probably disassociating from real life and just
Hmm.
kind of getting by and just living
Oh,
day by day, and their marriages get ruined and their
yeah.
relationships with their other children get ruined
Yeah.
because and and it's not necessarily their fault. They don't have support.
Yeah.
And they don't know how to ask for it.
Right.
They've been programmed, like our society is like, talking about this type of thing is shameful, and you should
Right.
be ashamed. You shouldn't, nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to
Right.
talk to you about that, and especially if that's the type of environment they live in, and it
Yeah.
just hurts my heart when I think about the women who can't get up from it.
Yeah. I agree. I totally feel the same way. And I am so thankful that I have, right?
Me
I
too.
think too, something I thought a lot about this past year as I was going through cancer treatment was I don't know if you've ever heard the saying that comparison is the killer of joy. And so one of the things that I noticed in myself was that, it's one thing to compare ourselves to the people who, have more, it looks prettier and shinier and newer and fancier and more on trend and yada yada, and they've got better vacations, and I mean, from like that outside sort of like
Yeah.
envious, like they've got more, clearly have more money, blah blah blah. But what I also noticed was that I found myself comparing myself to people who had, okay, however the right way to say this, have less, or appear to be suffering more, or are in worse situations than me, or have fewer resources, or have lack of access. And what for me, the distinction that I was able to notice is that it doesn't do me and my life any good to compare myself to people who have less, because what happens is that then I stop being grateful for what I do have, for my beautiful home and my amazing relationship with my husband and my incredible daughter. And this is again all in the context of having a stage 4 breast cancer diagnosis, right? Where because I would say, like, oh my gosh, do I deserve this meal train? Do do I
There's
deserve,
people who are suffering. This is, I don't know.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, I don't, do I like, should I be asking for help? There are people who need help more than me. So I don't I don't deserve this help, right? Again, it was all a noticing, and to go, you know what? I'm going to be just as careful when I notice myself shifting into this, like, oh, but there are people who have less than I do. Of course there are.
There always will be.
There always will be, right? But it doesn't serve really truly anyone, because to then go, oh, okay, well, you know what, I'm just not going to be, I shouldn't have these things, because it takes you out of the moment. It takes you out of what is beautiful about your life, what you can be grateful for.
And you're
And
allowed
I
to be
think
grateful for those things.
exactly, yes, like it is important to be able to say, yes, and the beautiful thing is that when we take care of ourselves and when we are grateful for what we do have, it makes us more available to help someone else,
Yeah.
right? Because it gets us out of our, eventually, like, when we can be grateful for what we have. And in my case, especially, I'm starting to feel better. I just finished radiation on February 3rd. I had 28
Oh,
straight rounds of radiation, 6 weeks. It was grueling, and towards the end, it was utterly exhausting. And I'm, quite frankly, I'm still exhausted.
oh my
Like,
God,
I'm
it has been,
still have
it's you have been 12
the
days.
the fatigue is still really real. But I have already been able to reach out my hand to other people and offer support and say, I would like to, return the favor, or what I would like to do something for you. How can I be of service? Right? How can I be of service to someone else? But first and foremost, in order to be of service of others, we have to take care of ourselves. And
Yeah.
so we get to be selfish, right, when we need it, right? This is a time, this time, for anyone who's going through loss, especially in the very early stages. I would say the first year, two,
Yeah.
you get a you get a pass. Like, you get a pass. Like, you get to be selfish. You get to take care of yourself. You get to ask for help. Um, because you need it. You
Yeah.
need it. And by sort of like, and for anyone else, like, if anyone's listening to this and, like, the first however many years have gone by and you're still totally stuck, now is the perfect opportunity to start getting unstuck, right? Like, there's always time. Like, it's the time is now. And healing can happen in an instant. And you mentioned Reiki. There's so many beautiful modalities and so many incredible healers out there. Hypnosis. I mean, there's just so many ways that you can reach deep and begin that healing process. It's never too late.
Yeah. And I feel another good note is saying that because grief is always there, it just a little less or more,
Yeah.
is that you'll have times when it completely knocks you off your feet again, and you might
Yes.
need to start all over. You might need to find a therapist. You might need to get more help again. Like, and
Yes.
it might stay for a while. It might stay for a few months, but that's okay.
It is. It's true. I really like to think about what I've one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about this past year is the evolution, right? That we evolve, right? So what I like about the idea of evolution is that it isn't like like I started at the bottom, and when I die, I'm going to end at the top, right? Like, no, it can be a crazy winding wish-washy squiggle mess, but
Yeah.
it's still an evolution because you're changing, right? So it's an evolution. And what I, again, in the context of my cancer treatment, but I really think it applies very much to anyone who's gone through baby loss, is we are never going to go back to anything. It's not, I'm going to get back. I'm not going to, we're never going to be the person that we were before our loss. It's a line in the sand.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to just kind of think of my life in terms of like before Poppy died and after Poppy died for a very long time. Now it's before I was diagnosed with cancer and after I was
Yeah.
diagnosed with cancer. I've got these two major lines, like the abyss of like, okay, life just, I like, and what I try to be very intentional in my language. You mentioned this earlier. I really try never to say, I want to get back into, let's say, shape or whatever. I want to get that the level of energy that I had before. I might never have the type of energy and endurance that I had before. It just, I might never have it, right? Like, cause I've been poisoned and radiated and cut open and all the things, right? It's possible in 2 or 3 years, but I also have to live 2 or 3 more years of life to get there, and effort to try, right? And so, like you said, intention, like I have to be like, that's what I want, but it's not a getting back.
Right.
It's going forward. It's always going forward, right? Even if going forward is painful, it's still going forward. And
Yeah.
again, like it's kind of, some of it is cliche, but it's, a lot of people don't actually think about these things. They don't give
Have
themselves the
to.
time or the space,
Honestly.
right?
If they've had
Right?
gone through chemo, if they haven't, like, I would never have the amount of wisdom and experience and the thoughts and feelings that you have because I've never been there. And so most of the people, the people who haven't been affected by child loss, infant
Yeah.
pregnancy loss and stuff, like, we can never expect them to understand. And that's something you said earlier. Um, yeah. Oh, there's so much. I feel like we could talk for another 5 hours.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. This has been really a wonderful conversation.
I
It's
know. I wanted to ask you one more thing though,
okay. Yeah.
because we talked about journaling and therapy.
Yes.
Is there something else that you think really helped you down your healing path that we haven't talked about?
Well, I mean, on the subject of this, I would say creativity. So explore your creativity. Um, create. Like the therapist that I ended up really resonating with ended up, she was an art therapist, and so we would create, and we would create in we would, and it was nothing that like I ever hung on the wall, right? Like it was just like, but I could use, our brain processes differently when we're when we're speaking versus when we're writing. It also processes differently when we're scribbling with crayons, a gnarly picture of whatever. Like I have one picture where I'm just like, all I drew was like flames. I remember just like drawing like flames and black, and then scribbling black all over it, because that's how I felt. It was just like burning
Yep.
darkness of smoke and whatever. And so, but then I kind of got into making collages, and then I would just gather random things around my house and make mosaics and like whatever. So I would say explore your creativity, if that's in song or dance or there's just so many ways to express ourselves creatively and to release our pain in those ways. And so I would say, yeah, writing, support groups, therapy, express your creativity, whatever way that looks like. Um, ask for help as much as you can. Yeah.
I always tell people to get sunshine, go outside.
Yes.
Even
Nature.
it's like the day after you lose your baby, go sit on your porch,
Yeah.
breathe in the air, drink
Yes.
water, get the sunshine. Like, I think we forget that some of the easiest ways, not even
Yes.
easiest, it's not easy. Even going
Well,
walking outside.
accessible.
There you go.
Yeah.
The most accessible
Free.
things that we can do. We just we I don't know, we've really forgotten what our bodies need.
Yes.
because we're told that they need all these other things.
Yes. Yes.
um, but water and sunshine and moving and just walking, like it is so healing.
Exercise was crucial. Yeah. I mean, I was determined to, for me in particular, I was
You were
very
athletic,
motivated.
right? You were,
Yeah, I am athletic. I was very motivated to lose the baby weight. I just was like, I was like, I gotta get this off. And for me, it was part of the, it was, again, it was 100% my perception of the world, but like I needed to not look at all postpartum.
yeah,
That was that part for me was so hard because I was just like, again, I wanted a t-shirt that said, there's a reason I look like this. You know what I mean? And I didn't look
yeah.
bad. It was, but again, it was my own
It
personal
was you. You needed,
image of
yeah,
me, right? And so, but yeah, but exercise, and then yeah, but getting outside and just going for long walks. And we adopted, I mean, that, you got to read the story,
yeah.
but we adopted a doggy, a puppy, and that, whoa gosh, summer to channel our love was so special. And
We
for
did that
me,
too.
it gave me the opportunity to be a mommy, just, I mean, even to a
Yeah,
puppy. And just last night, Eli and I were cuddling on the couch with Wilson, our dog, who is now 7. And just, I said to Eli, I never knew that like you could really love an animal so much. That, so for, for anyone whose heart is aching and that may have room for a pet in your life, rescue a pet. They will rescue you, you know,
seriously. Yeah, we
get,
did
they'll
the
get,
same.
especially a doggy, because a doggy will get you outside. You've
They
got to,
force
you know
you to
what I
take
mean?
care of them,
Right?
and you
You
have to.
have to take care of that doggy. You've got to go outside. It gets you outside. It gets you moving. And I mean, there's so much research around, the benefits of exercise, right? I mean, that sounds dumb, but I mean, specifically for sleeping, like if you're sleeping too much or you're having insomnia, right? Like getting outside, getting your exercise helps reestablish all your systems to know that, like, okay, now I'm tired, so I need to go to sleep. And it's
Yeah,
in the context of grief, right? Exercise,
yeah,
whatever form, if you're walking as slow as a turtle and you're outside, that's fine. At least you're moving, right? Just move your body.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Aw. Well, thank you so much. I'm so
Yeah,
happy
this is
that
awesome.
we do this. We're gonna have to do it again because I'm already thinking about other things that we did not talk about.
Let's
That we're
do.
gonna talk about with you. So,
Yeah.
yay.
That could be fun. We could, yeah, I could, yeah. I mean, I would love that, Valen. Totally. I'm
Yeah.
here. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, enjoy your engage anniversary. I hope you guys
Thank you.
have something you're gonna do today.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it was so fun because yesterday was Valentine's and he made chocolate covered strawberries and
These are my favorite. I could literally
so
live
good,
on
right? I
strawberries.
know. I know. I love strawberries. I'm so happy because this is like early February. Strawberries and asparagus are like the two spring. It's like the sign of spring coming
I
when they
know.
start to get in season. It's just like,
Oh my God.
but yeah, thank you so much, Valen. Thank you for doing
Yeah,
this podcast, for putting yourself out there. It's one
you
piece at a
too.
time.
I'm so
Yeah.
happy that we're able to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too. All right, darling.
Okay.
Till
Bye.
next time. Okay.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Pregnancy Loss Podcast. I hope you feel just a little bit lighter knowing you are not alone. Don't forget to share this episode or podcast with another person who may need the message. It is so helpful for me to help others find me. I'll see you next week for another episode of the Pregnancy Loss Podcast. Have a great week. Bye.